Welcome to Decoding the Big Book, a special limited series of the Sober Friends podcast. Researched and sourced from Writing the Big Book by William Shaberg, the purpose of each episode is to provide context and history for each chapter of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, followed by a reading of the chapter from the 4th edition. Each section is marked by chapters, so feel free to skip ahead to what you're interested in and leave the rest. Bill Wilson publicly deferred to the 100 members of AA as the real authors of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. However, in reality, Bill Wilson was the author of every chapter, including to wives, written in the voice of the female family members of alcoholics. The exception is the chapter to employers, which was written by Hank Parkhurst.
Hank who? Who's Hank Parkhurst? Henry G. Parkhurst was Bill's right-hand man in New York City. Now, you may never heard of him, but after Bill Wilson, Hank is the most important person in early Alcoholics Anonymous history by far.
According to William Shaberg in his book, Writing the Big Book, and in Sober Friends episode 110 and 111, besides Bill Wilson, Hank Parkhurst is the most responsible person for the writing of the Big Book. Hank Parkhurst's role was critical during the writing of the book. Without Hank's ideas, enthusiasm, drive, and push that he constantly gave Bill Wilson during the writing and promotional period, it would be impossible to guess if AA would be the program that it is today. As William Shaberg says, no Hank, no Big Book.
Hank was so central to the history of the writing of the Big Book that I can say without fear of contradiction, no Hank, no Big Book.
Hank Parkhurst has all but vanished from the official story of AA. Hank's full story is for another time, but some background is required to understand who he was, his role in the Big Book, and why his work history made him the perfect person to write to employers. Hank Parkhurst can be looked at as AA's forgotten man. Shaberg says it's because he drank again.
Henry G. Parkhurst, I call him the forgotten co-founder. He's all but written out of the story because he drank again. The book came out in April of 1939. By August, Hank was drunk and he never got sober for any length of time after that.
Because he drank shortly after the book Alcoholics Anonymous was written and published, his legacy has been forgotten.
But he's been so forgotten, so dismissed, so disregarded in Alcoholics Anonymous history that this guy doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, which I found shocking when I first started researching this book and I just go to Wikipedia for different things. I couldn't believe he didn't have a Wikipedia page.
The truth is that Hank was Bill's right-hand man from 1936 to 1939. Hank was likely a supporter of separating from the Oxford group and having AA forge its own path. Hank Parkhurst was a big thinker and loved big ideas. It's likely that Hank helped Bill move in the direction of raising money from the wealthy.
Wilson called him a super promoter. He was the greatest high-pressure salesman I've ever known. He said Hank was a terrific power driver and a hard-hitting salesman. Now, people talk about Wilson being a type A salesman kind of guy, you know? But if he was a type A guy, Hank Parkhurst was a triple A type guy. Jimmy Burwell, called him a high-pressure dynamo and described him as having an idea a minute.
Hank Parkhurst's early business training was with his time at Burroughs Adding Machine Company. He then operated his successful sales consulting business before taking a job with Standard Oil of Indiana. Hank was successful with Standard Oil and climbed the corporate ladder, rising from city manager to division sales manager to assistant general manager. He left Standard Oil of Indiana to start his own oil company, which he later sold to Standard Oil. They hired him back, and Hank's last role with Standard Oil was as the assistant wholesale manager for Standard Oil of New Jersey. Hank led 6,600 salesmen servicing 28,000 dealers. Bill reported that Hank's salary was $40,000 a year, $854,000 in 2022 money. Hank lost his job in 1935 due to his drinking. After Hank was a year sober in November 1936, Bill helped arrange financing for a new venture called Honor Dealers. Hank's idea was to be a cooperative buying group for gasoline, oil, tires, and automotive parts, bringing together an ever-expanding network of independent service stations bypassing the big guys, including Standard Oil. Hank expressed grandiose plans and vision for Honor Dealers, but it was never successful. Honor Dealers has a hand in AA history because Bill spent time there dictating his big book writing to Hank's secretary, Ruth Hawk, who then typed out Bill's direction. Hank Parkhurst returned to drinking by September 1939. He never again achieved permanent sobriety.
It wasn't just that he would drink again. He started warring with Bill Wilson. He did not go gently into the night, as I say.
It's with Hank's background in mind that he wrote the chapter to employers. Hank's pet theory was that large corporations would be more receptive to their new solutions than anyone else. In many ways, looking at modern HR structures and company EAPs, Hank was decades ahead of his time. Hank uses the chapter to point out the practicality of helping alcoholic employees for the business's bottom line. He also tries to help non-alcoholic businessmen understand alcoholism as a disease. Hank uses language around what the company may think of an alcoholic, that the perception is the alcoholic is weak-willed. The reality is that the alcoholic man has an illness, and that the treatment for this illness is found in the book they are reading. Hank asks the question that the employer might be thinking: is this a person who is worth saving? Hank believes the answer is yes.
Take a look at the alcoholic in your organization. Is he not usually brilliant, fast-thinking, imaginative, and likable? When sober, does he not work hard and have a knack for getting things done?
Hank breaks this argument into dollars and cents. The implication is that it makes financial sense for the company to rehabilitate and save such a valuable asset. Hank opens the chapter by establishing his credibility as a business leader, a leader of a department employing over 6,600 men, firing 3 men for drinking, each committing suicide, one jumping from a window, one putting a shotgun in his mouth, one hanging himself in the family woodshed. Hank states this may have been his fate, if not for, quote, the intervention of an understanding person, end quote. Hank immediately states his argument for the chapter.
My downfall cost the business community unknown thousands of dollars, for it takes real money to train a man for an executive position. This kind of waste goes on unabated. Our business fabric is shot through with it, and nothing will stop it but better understanding all around.
Hank discusses the difficulty the employer can have for the true understanding of the alcoholic. Hank uses a story to demonstrate the real-life struggle employers have on this subject. Hank tells the story of one of his friends, a bank executive, who struggled to manage an alcoholic coworker. Hank spends 2 hours trying to explain the alcoholic problem to no avail. The advice is to bring this man in contact with the new fellowship, or else this man is headed for big trouble. The advice is rejected, and as Hank feared, the man slipped and was fired. The bright side of the story is that the man did come in contact with this new fellowship and is on the road to recovery. Next message for the employer is they have to unlearn everything they hold so dear on their thoughts about alcoholism. Thinking that the alcoholic is weak and lazy is a misunderstanding that could lead to fatal results. The employer, instead, should think of the man as someone very ill and seldom as weak and irresponsible as they seem. Hank establishes what the employer should do for the man still sick and suffering.
Take a look at the alcoholic in your organization. Is he not usually brilliant, fast-thinking, imaginative, and likable? When sober, does he not work hard and have a knack for getting things done?
The implication Hank is making is that it makes business sense to save such a valuable asset to the company. Hank warns the employer about the man who does not want to stop. He states that this man might as well be discharged immediately, but that this type of drinker is the exception. If the employer believes the employee is sincere, he should be told that even physical treatment could be imperative and that the expense of treatment should be later deducted from his pay to make him feel fully responsible. Hank gives the employer the advice not to let their belief system get in the way by preventing the alcoholic family from hearing about this new solution, explicitly cautioning against any prejudices against AA's spiritual policy. Hank encourages the employer to call in the employee after getting sober to find out how the man plans to keep sober. He cautions the employer that they might hear shocking things like padding an expense account or a plan to leave the company and steal their best client. Hank states this is normal, and even if distressing, he advises the employer to give the man a fresh start. Hank warns that problems at home and within office politics when the employee returns should be expected and dealt with quickly and fairly. The employer should avoid situations that generate undue resentment, jealousy, envy, and the like, and by doing so, the employer will generate loyalty from the former drinker. Hank warns that the former alcoholic may trade one addiction for another, becoming a workaholic. The employer is encouraged to dissuade him from working 16 hours a day. Hank encourages the employer to involve the recovered man in conversations with other problem drinkers in the organization, as the newly sober man could be quite helpful. It's also important to have complete trust in the man when he returns. The employer should not worry about protecting him from any drinking situations that naturally arise in the workplace. If the employee relapses, the employer is encouraged to evaluate the man's sincerity of continuing recovery. If not, do not hesitate to terminate him. Hank then says that junior executives should be given the book to provide them with an understanding of alcoholism. They should then go to their drinking friends and say something to the effect of,
"Look here, Ed, do you want to stop drinking or not? You put me on the spot every time you get drunk. It isn't fair to me or the firm. I have been learning something about alcoholism. If you are an alcoholic, you are a mighty sick man. You act like one. The firm wants to help you get over it if you are interested. There is a way out, and I hope you have sense enough to try it. If you do, your past will be forgotten, and the fact that you went away for treatment will not be mentioned. But if you cannot or will not stop drinking, I think you ought to resign."
William Shaberg, in the book Writing the Big Book, is dubious that this scenario would work to the company's benefit and thought it hard to believe that Hank ever was seriously committed to the idea. However, distributing the book to employers and having them learn and talk about the contents did make sense to him. Hank cautions the employer against denying the problem in the workplace and that learning to deal with it makes more business sense. If the employer remains defiant, Hank states that the executive might take a look down the line to make some interesting discoveries. Hank ends the chapter with his experience.
"Today I own a little company. There are 2 alcoholic employees who produce much as 5 normal salesmen. But why not? They have a better way of life, and they have been saved from a living death. I have enjoyed every moment spent in getting them straightened out. You, Mr. Employer, may have the same experience."
Chapter 10, to Employers. Among many employers nowadays, we think of one member who has spent much of his life in the world of big business. He has hired and fired hundreds of men. He knows the alcoholic as the employer sees him. His present views ought to prove exceptionally useful to businessmen everywhere. But let him tell you. I was at one time assistant manager of a corporation department employing 6,600 men. One day, my secretary came in saying that Mr. B insisted on speaking with me. I told her to say that I was not interested. I had warned him several times that he had but one more chance. Not long afterward, he called me from Hartford on 2 successful days, so drunk he could barely speak. I told him he was through, finally and forever. My secretary returned to say that it was not Mr. B on the phone, it was Mr. B's brother, and he wished to give me a message. I still expected a plea for clemency, but these words came through the receiver. I just wanted to tell you Paul jumped from a hotel window in Hartford last Saturday. He left us a note saying that you were the best boss he ever had, that you were not to blame in any way. Another time, as I opened a letter which lay on my desk, a newspaper clipping fell out. It was the obituary of one of my best salesmen I ever had. After 2 weeks of drinking, he had placed his toe on the trigger of a loaded shotgun. The barrel was in his mouth. I had discharged him for drinking 6 weeks before. Still another experience. A woman's voice came faintly over long distance from Virginia. She wanted to know if her husband's company insurance was still in force. 4 days before, he had hanged himself in his woodshed. I had been obliged to discharge him for drinking, though he was brilliant, alert, and one of the best organizers I had ever known. How were 3 exceptional men lost to this world because I did not understand alcoholism as I do now? What an irony. I became an alcoholic myself. And but for the intervention of an understanding person, I might have followed in their footsteps. My downfall cost the business community unknown thousands of dollars, for it takes real money to train a man for an executive position. This kind of waste goes on unabated. We think the business fabric is shot through with a situation which might be helped by better understanding all around. Nearly every modern employer feels a moral responsibility for the well-being of his help, and he tries to meet these responsibilities. That he has not always done so for the alcoholic is easily understood. To him, the alcoholic has often seemed a fool of the first magnitude. Because of the employee's special ability or of his own strong personal attachment to him, the employer has sometimes kept such a man at work long beyond a reasonable period. Some employers have tried every known remedy. In only a few instances has there been a lack of patience and tolerance, and we who have imposed on the best of employers can scarcely blame them if they have been short with us. Here, for instance, is a typical example. An officer of one of the largest banking institutions in America knows I no longer drink. One day he told me about an executive of the same bank who, from his description, was undoubtedly alcoholic. This seemed to me like an opportunity to be helpful, so I spent 2 hours talking about alcoholism, the malady, and described the symptoms and results as well as I could. His comment was very interesting, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. He has just returned from a 3-month leave of absence, has taken a cure, looks fine, and to clinch the matter, the board of directors told him this was his last chance. The only answer I could make was that if the man followed the usual pattern, he would go on a bigger bust than ever. I felt this was inevitable and wondered if the bank was doing the man an injustice. Why not bring him into contact with some of our alcoholic crowd? He might have a chance. I pointed out that I had had nothing to drink, whatever, for 3 years. And this in the face of difficulties that would have made 9 out of 10 men drink their heads off. Why not at least afford him an opportunity to hear my story? "Oh no," said my friend. "This chap is either through with liquor or he is minus a job. If he has your power and guts, he will make the grade." I wanted to throw up my hands in discouragement, for I saw that I had failed to help my banker friend understand. He simply could not believe that his brother executive suffered from a serious illness. There was nothing to do but wait. Presently, the man did slip and was fired. Following his discharge, we contacted him. Without much ado, he accepted the principles and procedure that had helped us. He is undoubtedly on the road to recovery. To me, this incident illustrates lack of understanding as to what really ails the alcoholic, and lack of knowledge as to what part employers might profitably take in salvaging their sick employees. If you desire to help, it might be well to disregard your own drinking or lack of it. Whether you're a hard drinker, a moderate drinker, or a teetotaler, you may have some pretty strong opinions, perhaps prejudices. Those who drink moderately may be more annoyed with an alcoholic than a total abstainer would be. Drinking occasionally and understanding your own reactions, it is possible for you to become quite sure of many things which, so far as the alcoholic is concerned, are not always so. As a moderate drinker, you can take your liquor or leave it. Whenever you want to, you control your drinking. Of an evening, you can go on a mild bender, get up in the morning, shake your head, and go to business. To you, liquor is no real problem. You cannot see why it should be to anyone else, save the spineless and the stupid. When dealing with an alcoholic, there may be a natural annoyance that a man could be so weak, stupid, and irresponsible. Even when you understand the malady better, you may feel this feeling rising. A look at your alcoholic in your organization is many times illuminating. Is he not usually brilliant, fast-thinking, imaginative, and likable? When sober, does he not work hard and have a knack of getting things done? If he had these qualities and did not drink, would he be worth retaining? Should he have the same consideration as other ailing employees? Is he worth salvaging? If your decision is yes, whether the reason be humanitarian or business or both, then the following suggestions may be helpful. Can you discard the feeling that you are dealing only with habit, with stubbornness, or a weak will? If this presents difficulty, rereading chapters 2 and 3, where the alcoholic sickness is discussed at length, might be worthwhile. You, as a businessman, want to know the necessities before considering the result. If you can see that your employee is ill, can he be forgiven for what he has done in the past? Can his past absurdities be forgotten? Can it be appreciated that he has been a victim of crooked thinking directly caused by the action of alcohol on his brain? I well remember the shock I received when a prominent doctor in Chicago told me of cases where pressure of the spinal fluid actually ruptured the brain. No wonder an alcoholic is strangely irrational. Who wouldn't be with such a fevered brain? Normal drinkers are not so affected, nor can they understand the aberrations of the alcoholic. Your man has probably been trying to conceal a number of scrapes, perhaps pretty messy ones. They may be disgusting. You may be at a loss to understand how such a seemingly above-board chap could be so involved. But these scrapes can generally be charged, no matter how bad, to the abnormal action of alcohol on his mind. When drinking or getting over about an alcoholic, sometimes the model of honesty, when normal, will do incredible things. Afterward, his revulsion will be terrible. Nearly always, these antics indicate nothing more than temporary conditions. This is not to say that all alcoholics are honest and upright when not drinking. Of course, that isn't so, and such people often may impose on you. Seeing your attempt to understand and help, some men will try and take advantage of your kindness. If you are sure your man does not want to stop, he may as well be discharged. The sooner, the better. You are not doing him a favor by keeping him on. Firing such an individual may prove a blessing to him. It may be just the jolt he needs. I know in my particular case that nothing my company could have done would have stopped me, for so long as I was able to hold my position, I could not possibly realize how serious my situation was. Had they fired me first, and had they taken steps to see that I was presented with the solution contained in this book, I might have returned to them 6 months later a well man. But there are many men who want to stop, and with them you can go far. Your understanding treatment of their cases will pay dividends. Perhaps you have such a man in mind. He wants to quit drinking, and you want to help him, even if it be only a matter of good business. You know now more about alcoholism. You can see that he is mentally and physically sick. You are willing to overlook his past performances. Suppose an approach is made something like this. State you know about his drinking and that it must stop. You might say you appreciate his abilities, would like to keep him, but cannot if he continues to drink. A firm attitude at this point has helped many of us. Next, he can be assured that you do not intend to lecture, moralize, or condemn, that if this was done formally, it was because of misunderstanding. If possible, express a lack of hard feeling toward him. At this point, it might be well to explain alcoholism, the illness. Say that you believe he is a gravely ill person, disqualification, perhaps fatally ill. Does he want to get well? You ask because many alcoholics, being warped and drugged, do not want to quit. But does he? Will he take every necessary step submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? If he says yes, does he really mean it? Or down inside, does he think he is fooling you? And that after rest and treatment, he will be able to get away with a few drinks now and then? We believe a man should be thoroughly probed on these points. Be satisfied he is not deceiving himself or you. Whether you mention this book is a matter for your discretion. If he temporizes and still thinks he can ever drink again, even beer, he might as well be discharged after the next bender, which, if an alcoholic, he is almost certain to have. He should understand that emphatically. Either you are dealing with a man who can and will get well, or you are not. If not, why waste time with him? This may seem severe, but it is usually the best course. After satisfying yourself that your man wants to recover and that he will go to any extreme to do so, you may suggest a definite course of action. For most alcoholics who are drinking or who are just getting over a spree, a certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, even imperative. The matter of physical treatment should, of course, be referred to your own doctor. Whatever the method, its object is to thoroughly clear mind and body of the effects of alcohol. In competent hands, this seldom takes long, nor is it very expensive. Your man will fare better if he is placed in such physical condition that he can think straight and no longer craves alcohol. If you propose such a procedure to him, it may be necessary to advance the cost of treatment, but we believe it should be made plain that any expense will later be deducted from his pay. It is better for him to feel fully responsible. If your man accepts your offer, it should be pointed out that physical treatment is but a small part of the picture. Though you are providing him with the best possible medical attention, he should understand that he must undergo a change of heart. To get over drinking will require a transformation of thought and attitude. We all had to place recovery above everything, for without recovery, we would have lost both home and business. Can you have every confidence in his ability to recover? While on the subject of confidence, can you adopt the attitude that so far as you are concerned, this will be a strictly personal matter, that his alcoholic derelictions, the treatment about to be undertaken, will never be discussed without his consent? It might be well to have a long chat with him on his return. To return to the subject matter of this book, it contains full suggestions by which the employee may solve his problem. To you, some of the ideas which it contains are novel. Perhaps you are not quite in sympathy with the approach we suggest. By no means do we offer it as the last word on the subject, but so far as we are concerned, it has worked with us. After all, are you not looking for results rather than methods? Whether your employee likes it or not, he will learn the grim truth about alcoholism. That won't hurt him a bit, even though he does not go for this remedy. We suggest you draw the book to the attention of the doctor who is to attend your patient during treatment. If the book is read the moment the patient is able, while acutely depressed, realization of his condition may come to him. We hope the doctor will tell the patient the truth about his condition, whatever that happens to be. When the man is presented with this volume, it is best that no one tell him he must abide by its suggestions. The man must decide for himself. You are betting, of course, that your changed attitude plus the contents of this book will turn the trick. In some cases, it will. In other cases, it may not. But we think that if you persevere, the percentage of successes will gratify you. As our work spreads and our numbers increase, we hope your employees may be put in personal contact with some of us. Meanwhile, we are sure a great deal can be accomplished by the use of this book alone. On your employee's return, talk to him. Ask him if he thinks he has the answer. If he feels free to discuss his problems with you, if he knows you understand and will not be upset by anything he wishes to say, he will probably be off to a fast start. In this connection, can you remain undisturbed if the man proceeds to tell you shocking things? He may, for example, reveal that he has padded his expense account or that he has planned to take your best customers away from you. In fact, he may say almost anything if he has accepted our solution, which, as you know, demands rigorous honesty. Can you charge this off as you would a bad account and start fresh with him? If he owes you money, you may wish to make terms. If he speaks of his home situation, you can undoubtedly make helpful suggestions. Can he talk frankly with you so long as he does not bear business tales or criticize his associates? With this kind of employee, such an attitude will command undying loyalty. The greatest enemies of us alcoholics are resentment, jealousy, envy, frustration, and fear. Wherever men are gathered together in business, there will be rivalries, and arising out of these, a certain amount of office politics. Sometimes we alcoholics have an idea that people are trying to pull us down. Often, this is not so at all, but sometimes our drinking will be used politically. One instance comes to mind, which a malicious individual was always making friendly little jokes about an alcoholic's drinking exploits. In this way, he was slyly carrying tales. In another case, an alcoholic was sent to a hospital for treatment. Only a few knew of it at first, but within a short time, it was billboarded throughout the entire company. Naturally, this sort of thing decreases the man's chance of recovery. The employer can many times protect the victim from this kind of talk. The employer cannot play favorites, but he can always defend a man from needless provocation and unfair criticism. As a class, alcoholics are energetic people. They work hard and they play hard. Your man should be on his mettle to make good. Being somewhat weakened and faced with physical and mental adjustment to a life which knows no alcohol, he may overdo. You may have to curb his desire to work 16 hours a day. You may need to encourage him to play once in a while. He may wish to do a lot for other alcoholics, and something of the sort may come up during business hours. A reasonable amount of latitude will be helpful. This work is necessary to maintain his sobriety. After your man has gone along without drinking for a few months, you may be able to make use of his services with other employees who are giving you the alcoholic runaround, provided, of course, they are willing to have a third party in the picture. An alcoholic who has recovered but holds a relatively unimportant job can talk to a man with a better position. Being on a radically different basis of life, he will never take advantage of the situation. Your man must be trusted. Long experience with alcoholic excuses naturally arouse suspicion. When his wife next calls saying he is sick, you might jump to the conclusion he is drunk. If he is, and is still trying to recover, he will tell you about it even if it means the loss of his job. For he knows he must be honest if he would live at all. He will appreciate knowing you are not bothering your head about him, that you are not suspicious, nor are you trying to run his life, so he will be shielded from temptation to drink. If he is conscientiously following the pattern of recovery, he can go anywhere your business may call him. In case he does not stumble, even once, you will have to decide whether to let him go. If you are sure he doesn't mean business, there is no doubt you should discharge him. If, on the contrary, you are sure he is doing his utmost, you may wish to give him another chance, but you should feel under no obligation to keep him on, for your obligation has been well discharged already. There is another thing you might wish to do. If your organization is a large one, your junior executives might be provided with this book. You might let them know you have no quarrel with the alcoholics of your organization. These juniors are often in a difficult position. Men under them are frequently their friends. So for one reason or another, they cover these men, hoping matters will take a turn for the better. They often jeopardize their own positions by trying to help serious drinkers who should have been fired long ago or else given an opportunity to get well. After reading this book, a junior executive can go to such a man and say appropriately this: "Look here, Ed, do you want to stop drinking or not? You put me on the spot every time you get drunk. It isn't fair to me or to the firm. I have been learning something about alcoholism. If you are an alcoholic, you are a mighty sick man. You act like one. The firm wants to help you get over it, and if you are interested, there is a way out. If you take it, your past will be forgotten, and the fact that you went away for treatment will not be mentioned. But if you cannot or will not stop drinking, I think you ought to resign. Your junior executive may not agree with the contents of our book. He need not, and often should not show it to his alcoholic prospect. But at least he will understand the problem and will no longer be misled by ordinary promises. He will be able to take a position with such a man which is eminently fair and square. He will have no further reason for covering up an alcoholic employee. It boils down to this: no man should be fired just because he is alcoholic. If he wants to stop, he should be afforded a real chance. If he cannot or does not want to stop, he should be discharged. The exceptions are few. We think this method of approach will accomplish several things. It will permit the rehabilitation of good men. At the same time, you will feel no reluctance to rid yourself of those who cannot or will not stop. Alcoholism may be causing your organization considerable damage in its waste of time, men, and reputation. We hope our suggestions will help you plug up this sometimes serious leak. We think we are sensible when we urge that you stop this waste and give your worthwhile man a chance. The other day, an approach was made to the vice president of a large industrial concern. He remarked, "I'm mighty glad you fellas got over your drinking, but the policy of this company is not to interfere with the habits of our employees. If a man drinks so much that his job suffers, we fire him. I don't see how you can be of any help to us, for, as you see, we don't have any alcoholic problem. This same company spends millions for research every year. Their cost of production is figured to a fine decimal point. They have recreational facilities. There is company insurance. There is real interest, both humanitarian and business, and in the well-being of employees. But alcoholism, well, they just don't believe they have it. Perhaps this is a typical attitude. We who have collectively seen a great deal of business life, at least from the alcoholic angle, had to smile at this gentleman's sincere opinion. He might be shocked if he knew how much alcoholism is costing his organization a year. That company may harbor many actual or potential alcoholics. We believe that managers of large enterprises often have little idea how prevalent this problem is. Even if you feel your organization has no alcoholic problem, it might pay to take another look down the line. You may make some interesting discoveries. Of course, this chapter refers to alcoholics, sick people, deranged men. What our friend, the vice president, had in mind was the habitual or whoopee drinker. As to them, his policy is undoubtedly sound, but he did not distinguish between such people and the alcoholic. It is not to be expected that an alcoholic employee will receive a disproportionate amount of time and attention. He should not be made a favorite. The right kind of man, the kind who recovers, will not want this sort of thing. He will not impose. Far from it. He will work like the devil and thank you to his dying day. Today, I own a little company. There are 2 alcoholic employees who produce as much as 5 normal salesmen. But why not? They have a new attitude, and they have been saved from a living death. I have enjoyed every moment spent in getting them straightened out. A note at the end of this chapter, see Appendix 6. We shall be happy to hear from you if we can be of help. Appendix 6, how to get in touch with AA. In the United States and Canada, most towns and cities have AA groups. In such places, AA can be located through the local telephone directory, newspaper office, or police station, or by contacting local priests or ministers. In large cities, groups often maintain local offices where alcoholics or their families may arrange for interviews or hospitalization. These so-called intergroup associations are found under the listing AA or Alcoholics Anonymous in telephone directories. At New York, USA, Alcoholics Anonymous maintains an international service center. The General Service Board of AA, the trustees, administers AA's General Service Office, AA World Services Incorporated, and our monthly magazine, the AA Grapevine. If you cannot find AA in your locality, visit our website, www.aa.org, or a letter addressed to Alcoholics Anonymous, Box 459, Grand Central Station, New York, New York, 10163 USA will receive a prompt reply from this World Center referring you to the nearest AA group. If there is none nearby, you will be invited to carry a correspondence, which will do much to ensure your sobriety, no matter how isolated you are. Should you be the relative or friend of an alcoholic who shows no immediate interest in AA, it is suggested that you write the Al-Anon Family Groups, Incorporated, 1600 Corporate Landing Parkway, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23454-5617, USA. This is a world clearinghouse for the Al-Anon Family Groups, composed largely of the wives, husbands, and friends of AA members. This headquarters will give you the location of the nearest family group and will, if you wish, correspond with you about your special problems. Decoding the Big Book is a special limited series of the Sober Friends podcast. It's produced, engineered, written, and narrated by me, Pat J. Source material for Decoding the Big Book is from Writing the Big Book by William Shaber. We'll include a link to this highly recommended book in the show notes. Additional sourcing comes from William Shaber's YouTube channel and the Joe and Charlie Big Book study groups. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.